our Center for the Arts studio, this is Eagle's Eye. I'm your host, Connor Dunwoodie. Thanks for joining us today. Today with me is Dr. Jeffrey Weidenhamer, Trustees Professor of Chemistry here at Ashland University. Thank you for being with us today.
You're welcome.
Now, Dr. Weidenhamer, you are the coordinator for this year's Symposium Against Indifference, which talks about the topic of environmental sustainability. Could you kind of tell us what was the driving force behind making that the topic for this year's symposium?
This symposium is something that the College of Arts and Sciences has every other year. And we have a committee that solicits ideas from the faculty about possible topics. This is one that sort of rose to the top in terms of level of interest. It impacts a lot of different fields, and so we thought it was time to select that as our theme for this year.
Definitely, definitely. So there are still 5 events left in this year's symposium. Could you tell us a little about the other 5 events that are coming up?
Yes, coming up on March 15th, we have an environmental philosopher from Clarkson University, Bill Vitek, who's going to be talking about sustainable agriculture. He's worked extensively with Wes Jackson of the Land Institute out in Kansas on the development of some perennial farming systems that have much less environmental impact. At the end of the month, we have a geologist. This is a talk that's co-sponsored by the Department of Chemistry, Geology, and Physics, an Ashland University grad, Wayne Goodman. He's going to be talking about taking carbon dioxide from the air and injecting it into deep geological wells. Then in April, we have 3 final events. Bruce Lanphier is a very well-known medical researcher in the area of the effects of toxins on children. And he'll be here on April 5th to talk about the impacts of various technologies on human health. And it should be a really fascinating talk for that. And 2 other talks in April. We have Scott Russell Sanders, who's going to be in for a talk to the English department. He's going to be talking about the relation of human wealth to the wealth that's provided to us by ecosystems that we usually don't figure into economic calculations. And then the final talk is going to be another a talk by an Ashland University grad, Mark Klingshirn, who teaches at a university in Illinois, talking about green chemistry. And so ways to do chemical syntheses and other processes without negatively impacting the environment.
Very cool. So I understand that these symposiums are every other year.
Yes.
How much time went into getting everything ready for this year's series?
Well, there's a lot of time and planning, and not just by the symposium committee, but by other departments. This year we had 4 main events that have been planned by the committee and the college, and then we have co-sponsored events with a number of arts and sciences departments that contribute to this.
Very cool, very cool. So given that you're a professor here at AU, as well as a coordinator for the symposium, where do you fall on the issues of environmental sustainability?
Well, I think it goes without saying that, you know, to have sustainable processes is essential to our future. We get a lot of, crucial resources from the planet, whether it's the food we eat, the air we breathe. Ecosystems do a lot to clean the air, to clean the water. And so the question of what is the planet's environment going to be like 200 years from now? What are our grandchildren going to have to deal with that perhaps were problems that we caused? The more we can do to create a sustainable environment for us and for our children, I think the better off the planet will be. There's out in the American West right now, there are areas of farmland that are now sitting fallow, and they're sitting fallow because they, for a number of years, had been irrigated, very productive land, but what was being done is to essentially mine the groundwater. So the groundwater was being removed at a very high rate, faster than it can be replenished. And so now you have aquifers, entire aquifers that have been drained. They can't irrigate anymore. The climate is too dry to farm. And that would be an example of an unsustainable practice.
Definitely. As you know, there are many people that denounce these kind of things like global warming and climate change. Do you believe environmental sustainability issues such as climate change or deforestation are legitimate concerns people should be addressing here, especially even in this upcoming election and so on?
Well, I think I go back to a comment that Thomas Jefferson made once to James Madison on a letter he wrote, which was that he considered it immoral to pass on debts to future generations. And if we adopt environmentally unsustainable practices, we're basically imposing a debt on a future generation that they're going to have to deal with and to address later on. And if that's avoidable on our part right now, we should be looking for ways to avoid that. Specifically with respect to climate change, which very much in the news is, there's a lot of controversy around it in the scientific community. There's not so much controversy. You can go to the NASA's website on climate change, and they have a interesting section of that website on the scientific consensus. There have been several studies that have been done. One recent study done has shown that 97% of the published studies on climate change, where people have drawn a conclusion on whether or not humans are causing climate change, 97% of those studies agree that this is a major problem, that humans are in fact playing a role. So on the scientific side of the consensus, people agree humans are causing it. There is disagreement about the extent of change that may occur, what the consequences are going to be. But we understand that this is happening. One thing when we talk about climate change, it's both the temperature increasing on average, and that's an average for the planet, so you can still have areas where there's very cold winter due to something going on. But there's also changes occurring in the oceans due to, as you put more carbon dioxide in the air from combustion of fossil fuels, that dissolves into the ocean water. And that makes ocean water more acidic. We know since the Industrial Revolution that the oceans are about 30% more acidic than they were at that time. And there are more and more studies coming out showing that the level of acidity in the oceans right now is impacting the growth and development of marine creatures.
Wow. Well, so how do you think we should start addressing these issues that we're presented with?
Well, this is a symposium against indifference, so one of the things that the college is hoping to do is both highlight important issues and also highlight the fact that there are things, positive things that can be done that will make a difference in the future, so that there is hope. 40 years ago, the Cuyahoga River was burning. It doesn't burn anymore. When I was growing up and young, the populations of bald eagles had plummeted due to the use of DDT and other pesticides. We made changes in policy. The populations of bald eagles have bounced back. We've had bald eagles sighted regularly out at our nature preserve on Route 42. So there are positive things that we can do that will make a difference in the future. And with respect to climate change, things to improve energy efficiency, shift to renewable resources, those things are going to make a big difference over the long term.
So what sort of things can individuals, especially students here at AU, can do to start making advances to help curb this issue?
Well, for energy efficiency, it can be very small things, like just remembering to flip off the lights when you go out of the room, to using recyclable containers when you can get reusable containers. Those sorts of things make a difference. Cumulatively, if we all do those things. The sorts of lights that we use in our homes. LEDs take a lot less energy, but they're a bit more of an investment initially. Over the long term, they end up being cheaper, but initially they cost a lot more to buy. So those sorts of individual choices cumulatively do make an impact. There are other things that we have to ask for changes in policy. On the personal side, things like choosing to, when there's an option to buy food that's grown locally. So it's not being flown from halfway across the world to get to you, but maybe it was grown at a local orchard or a local farm. Those sorts of things can make a difference.
So you mentioned policies.
Yes.
What sort of policies do you think on the local and national level we should be looking at for this issue?
That's a very good question. One of the big questions right now, and obviously that's been a focal point for a lot of policy questions, is just the issue of climate change. What should be done? Are there things that we can do to minimize further damage to the atmosphere by increasing the CO2 concentrations? So whether that should be by a tax on different sorts of fuels that produce carbon, whether it should be for tax incentives for renewable energy resources like wind and solar power. Those are big questions that I think are important to address and to deal with.
Now, right now, like nationally with all the politics and stuff going on, are there any for sure things going on that are making positive steps toward that direction, towards more environmental sustainability?
Well, right now things are in a lot of flux and you have different sides saying different things. I think the thing that I come back to is that all of us, whether Republican or Democrat or independent or whatever, share the same planet. And so if we think of these issues in terms of what is it going to be like for our children and for our grandchildren, I think people can find some unity in terms of looking at issues like that, because I think everyone wants to leave a planet that our children and grandchildren can prosper on.
Definitely. Are there any final thoughts on anything that we covered today, whether it be the symposium or policies nationally, that you'd like to touch on?
Well, I would just encourage people to come out to these events as they can. I think we've got very excited by the speakers that we have coming in, who are very top-notch, and I think if you're able to come, these will be great events and will stimulate thinking on what can be done.
Definitely, definitely. Well, that looks like all the time we have for this episode here of Eagle's Eye. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for watching. That will be it for this episode of Eagle's Eye. Tune in next time to see our next episode.